Hello lovely people, my name is Emma, and today I am filming my translated fiction TBR for 2020. So this is actually the first video that I'm filming in 2020, though my posting schedule is always a mess and lots of things are posted out of filming order. But I've basically been recovering from a quite severe bout of sinusitis and a chest infection across the festive season. So it might be a bit bad still, but I have been on the mend enough that I want to film today. Like, I have been so keen to film over these past like 6 days, and I've not been able to because I've been ill, and I've been so grumpy about that fact. And I have like 6 videos that I want to film at the moment, plus a ton of book reviews, and I haven't been able to do any of them. So we're going to test out today with my translated fiction TBR. Back when I first started my channel in 2018, I set myself a fairly absurd goal of trying to read a book from every country, and I didn't even make the first video, I don't think. It was generally a bit of a train wreck and got completely ignored as soon as my channel actually started doing anything. But the energy behind that particular challenge was actually, I just wanted to read more books from authors who weren't strictly from the UK or the US, and I wanted to read more books that weren't just set strictly in the UK or US. And actually a really nice, obvious way of being able to do this is to read more translated fiction rather than just specifically fiction set in particular countries that were being randomly generated for me. So with this in mind, I've decided I'm going to try and read 20 translated fiction in 2020. I talked about this in my goals video that I'll link down below, but this video today is a TBR of the 10 books that I'm currently interested in reading from translated fiction, similar to how I do with like my classics TBR as well. Obviously these will not be the sum total of the translated fiction I read. I may not get to all of them, but currently this is what is interesting me. On this list I have 5 that I already own, and then 5 that I do need to purchase at or find in some capacity, whether it be library or whatever, at some point as well. And the way that I amassed this list was, like with any book recommendations, basically just went onto BookTube and put in like top translated fiction, and then watched a bunch of videos from like a ton of people, and basically just made a note of anything that sounded really cool and interesting. So the first book I have to talk about is actually one that I've already read. It is the first and currently at this point in time only book that I read in 2020, and that is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi, and this was translated by Jeffrey Truslow. There we go. This is an absolutely wonderful little story about a cafe where if you sit in a particular seat, you have the opportunity to go back in time, but there are many rules attached to this. So when you go back in time, you cannot leave the seat. You can only meet people who have been to the cafe, naturally, because you can't leave the seat. And you have the length of time it takes for the coffee poured in front of you to cool to get to like leave. Otherwise you will be trapped as a ghost like between time periods. It's a lovely little mishmash series of vignettes from the various characters who come to this cafe. You know, some of them use it to see relatives one last time, some of them to try and redo conversations. You can't change what happens in the present in terms of the actual actions, but it's an opportunity for people to get a second chance at various different human relationships, and it's absolutely lovely and heartwarming. I gave it 5 stars. I read it in a day. So enjoyable, and really just what I needed for the beginning of the year. It's like really starts the year off right, and just, yeah, absolutely wonderful. So I really heavily recommend this. It's the only one I've read so far, and I would have got this video done before I read that had I not got sinusitis, but I wasn't going to not read a book I was super psyched about just because I hadn't done a TBR video for it, so like, screw it. Another one that I'm interested in is the Nakano Thrift Shop, which is by Hiromi Kawakami and was translated by Alison Markin Powell. This again is supposed to be quite a cute story. It's set in like a bric-a-brac shop or thrift shop, as the name suggests, and it's about the woman who works there and some of the characters that she meets along the way. It sounds like it's going to be a bit of a love story between her and Takio, who comes into the store quite often. This has been mentioned on quite a few channels. It's probably one of the most popular translated fiction on my shelf. As you probably noticed, the past 2 books I think have been translated from Japanese, or they're definitely that kind of East Asian inspired. One of them might be Korean. when we start to drift across country, because I don't just have Japanese or East Asian books on here, I've got some from kind of Scandinavia, a few other areas in the world, I will mention wherever that is relevant. Next one that I'm super keen for, which I picked up, this wasn't actually from a recommendations video, this is something I picked up on a bit of spur of the moment kind of whim, is China Dream by Mei Jian, which is translated by Flora Drew. This is supposed to be kind of like a Chinese version of 1984. It's a very Orwellian kind of story. It's about a gentleman who works for the Chinese government, coming up with a computer chip that can be installed in people's brains to be able to replace painful memories with like a national pride and kind of like a national collective hive mind. But then just as he's finishing this work, he starts to have a bit of his own, of like a breakdown and kind of question what he's doing. It sounds insane and so cool and like right up my alley for both like dystopian fiction and yeah, just ridiculously awesome. So I really can't wait to get to this one. This one might be the one that I go for next out of like my collection of translated fiction. We have the last one from my East Asian inspired collection of that I currently own. I'm sure there are more on my list, but that is 6-4 by Hideo Yokoyama, who's it translated by? Translated by Jonathan Lloyd Davies. This is basically a revenge drama, and this one was recommended by Goodreads because I marked the book Grotesque as one that I'd read. I read that many years ago now when I was in school in like my GCSEs, and it was kind of my first foray into like Japanese literature. It was this really awesome crime noir kind of thing set in like a mobster sort of era, about two missing girls. So cool. I really want to get the book again and reread it, or like read more from the author, but this one was recommended because I marked that one as read. So it's like a cold case that is a bit of an embarrassment to the police force that gets brought back to light, and I'm sure it's going to be awesome. And apparently it's revenge drama, which I'm very excited by. I like police procedural stuff as well. I think this is really going to tick a lot of boxes. It's beefy though, so like God knows when I'm going to quite get around to it in the year. And then the final one that I actually own was a Christmas present from my future in-laws, so thank you very much to them, and it is Jo Nesbø's Macbeth. This is part of the Hogarth Shakespeare series, which is where there's a publishing company that commissions various modern authors to retell Shakespeare classics. This was translated from Norwegian by Don Bartlett, so yes, Norwegian author. Jo Nesbø became very popular in the UK around the time of Stieg Larsson and the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Some of his other books that he's written are The Snowman is probably his biggest. I've never actually read any of his, but this was on my list because of the Hogarth Shakespeare thing, and then it's almost like just fortuitous that it happens to be translated anyway, which there are a handful of books on my shelf like that where like I was going to read them regardless of this challenge, and then looking at it I'm like, oh my god, I totally forgot that that was translated. Like everything by Walter Moers is translated from German, and I just totally spaced on that fact. So one of my all-time favourite authors is actually like not an English author, and that's wicked. That should be the case. It's awesome. But yeah, so this one is a retelling of Macbeth, where Macbeth is a cop and there's a drug bust that goes badly, and then he starts to get really like paranoid. It looks really fun. I love Macbeth. I love Shakespeare in general. The tragedies are so much fun. Macbeth isn't one of the ones that I know the most of his collection of plays, so I'm very keen to try this modern retelling. And now we have 5 books that I don't own yet. I'm gonna get at some point. First one comes from an author that was so heavily recommended in all of the like top translation videos that I knew one of their books was definitely gonna be on the list, and this is the one that I'm currently most interested in, but there is no guarantee that it will definitely be this book of theirs, but I would definitely read something from them, and that is Banana Yoshimoto. The book in question is called NP and was translated by Anne Sheriff. Banana Yoshimoto has like a huge back catalogue and seems to do quite like absurdist, slightly grotesque in places, like enchanting but uncanny and a bit creepy short novels. So this one is about a book that a writer was, this person was writing a book, they commit suicide before they've officially finished it. Every time someone tries to translate it, they then end up committing suicide as well, and it's kind of like this knock-on effect. It's got kind of like a Ring-esque vibe to it. It looks really freaky and cool, and basically the story focuses around the girlfriend of someone who attempted to translate it and then committed suicide, and it's like her investigation into the whole situation. So that looks really awesome, but like I said, could be another one from Banana Yoshimoto. Now we're going for a slightly different location, which is very exciting. I have Man Tiger by Eka Kunariawan. This is actually an Indonesian book, and it tells the story of two like interlocking families, and I think it's to do with, there's like a myth about tigers in that part of the world, about the idea of like a man being turned into a tiger and something to do with their ghosts. But yeah, so, and I read a book called The Night Tiger, which kind of had a bit of this reference in it. So this one looks very exciting. It's a young man, ordinary in all particulars, except he conceals within himself a supernatural female white tiger. And it's supposed to be like a mixture of a family drama meets magical realism. Looks really funky. I'll let you know when I actually get around to purchasing this book in some capacity, who translates it, and when I eventually read it. So that looks really cool and exciting. Then I have another one called The Women in the Dunes, and this is by Kobo Abe, and was translated by E. Dale Saunders. And this one is about an amateur entomologist who goes out to these dunes to like go and make some observations, but when he camps out there, the locals like basically trap him and force him to be digging these dunes because of like the threat that they pose to the village. And it's him and this other random woman who's out there, and it's described as how their fates become intertwined as they work side by side through the Sisyphean of tasks. And it just looks really like quirky and funky and weird. And again, this was from a recommendations video, and the woman talking about it, I can't remember half these videos, I'm sorry, I watched literally like 40 translation videos, put this list together to get like a real idea of what I wanted to be reading. But she mentioned that this one is just so dark and spooky and atmospheric and intense, and it really, like, I think it's gonna tie in really nicely with this like nature writing kick I'm on at the moment, and it just looks like it's gonna be really atmospheric and moody and cool. The next one I have to talk about is called The Blue Fox. It's by Sujon, and it's been translated by Victoria Cribb. This is a Icelandic book, won a bunch of prizes over in Iceland. It's like a historical fiction set in the 1880s, and it's to do with a priest on the hunt for a blue fox, and then it's like, then there's like a modern day thing kind of mixed in. It's got a bit of a magical realism kind of slant. There's some like folklore kind of things. I don't actually know a crazy amount about this one, but I really liked the idea of checking out some kind of like historical fiction from, again, a different culture and a different different country, and like just kind of check out a few more like Scandinavian-y kind of options, because a lot of this very much is leaning towards like an East Asian slant, and I just wanted to try a few different ideas really more than anything else. So yeah, so that one looks really cool and a bit weird, and I think will be good fun in the winter. I'm hoping it might tap into some of that like The Bear and the Nightingale kind of vibes, and really get that like wintry, warm, cozy feeling. That'll be really good fun. And then I think the last one I have to talk about is actually just an entire author, and that's Haruki Murakami, who is probably the most commercially successful and well-known translated fiction author out there, who has written a lot of stuff, has won a bunch of prizes. You've got 1Q84 or IQ84, something like that, the Wind Up Chronicles, Norwegian Wood. There's a whole bunch of different books by them, and basically they're like such a big name prolific author that I know I want to check them out, but I really don't know which one. The one that I mentioned, which has got 84 at the end, it's either 1Q84 or IQ84, and I'm not quite too sure. That one is on like a separate reading challengey thing that I might be doing, so if I end up getting far enough in that challenge, which I don't want to talk too much about it because I'm going to spoil a bunch of stuff for later on in the year, if I get far enough into that challenge, I might end up picking that one up anyway. But even if I don't, I think I want to go for one of his, because it's just such like a weird mixed response from the internet in general about their books that I don't really know where I stand with them, but I think it could be really fun to find out. So yeah, so that's kind of it from me. If you have any other translated fiction recommendations, please do obviously put them down below. If you have ideas of like where I should start with this list, obviously some of the classics I'm going to be reading this year are going to feature for my translated fiction anyway, like the Russian literature I want to get through and some of the French classics I want to hit, like they still clearly count. If you know of any like good translated non-fiction, hit me up, because that's like a whole subcategory I didn't even think about. So yeah, that'd be wicked to do as well. But yeah, basically I'm gonna get off camera, go down a corner, listen to an audiobook, and that's pretty much it. So yeah, like, sorry, pretty low energy video today, but I wanted to film, and I don't care that I feel bad. I wanted to film, so I filmed, and this footage might be unusable, in which case you will never see it. But if you have seen it, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful reading week, and I will chat to you soon. Bye. My Stegosaurus also says bye. Bye.